Hello, I'm Benny Parsons. Let me introduce you to a couple of guys who've had some unbelievable crashes and some great success, the Waltrip brothers. First of all, a trip down Waltrip memory lane. Then I'll sit down and interview Darrell and Michael at Darrell's home in Franklin, Tennessee. The dynamic world of auto racing is exhilarating, at the same time death-defying. Darrell and Michael Waltrip have faced racing's dark side and survived. When you combine their love for competition and their love for auto racing, you've got two guys that are willing to push it to the limit. As an 11-year-old boy growing up in Owensboro, Kentucky, Darrell Waltrip had two passions: dogs and go-karts. Darrell's go-kart career began as a hobby with his dad Leroy in the 1960s, racing to an unprecedented 500 wins. Darrell's success on the go-kart track was an omen of things to come. In May of 1972, Darrell started his first Winston Cup race. He finished 38th, pulling down a paltry $680. 3 years later, before a hometown crowd in Nashville, Tennessee, Darrell grabbed his first Winston Cup victory. This would become a familiar scene for DW. The early 80s ushered in a new owner and a new standard for success. Darrell left Bill Gardner's Diegard team to join Junior Johnson. During their 6 years together, Darrell and Junior racked up an impressive 43 wins and 3 national championships.
Has it been blown out of proportion? Has it been gaining too much publicity as far as you're concerned?
No, I think the National 500 is getting what it deserves.
Darrell had a way of tarnishing his reputation with controversial interviews and blow-ups. Eventually, he grew tired of seeing himself portrayed on television as the bad boy of racing and decided to change. Family support and strong religious convictions helped Darrell make changes in his personal life. After his first Daytona victory in 1989 and his run-in with Rusty Wallace later that season at the Winston in Charlotte, North Carolina, he saw his fan support grow so dramatically, he was voted most popular driver in 1989 and 1990. One of Darrell's many fans is his younger brother, Michael. Michael's interest in racing began, like Darrell's, with go-karts. Developing rapidly in the sport, Michael raced through the go-kart tracks and the Dash Series. By 1983, he captured NASCAR's national championship for the Charlotte Daytona Dash Series. In 1985, with advice from the king, Richard Petty, Michael decided to look for a Winston Cup sponsor. Now, 6 years later, he's still with the Bahari race team, and the driver of the Pennzoil Pontiac has established himself as a top driver. Although he has a way to go to catch Darrell's $10 million in career earnings, Michael does have the distinction of being one of 36 drivers to exceed the $1 million mark. Michael lives a fast-paced life off the track as well. Even though he enjoys his bachelor lifestyle in Davidson, North Carolina, Michael also stays very close to his family.
Well, I need to be at the shop. I don't need to be there every day, but I need to be there occasionally.
At his home in Franklin, Tennessee, Darrell escapes the pressures of racing.
Darrell, come here and watch Missy.
On his farm, surrounded by a barnyard of animals, D.W. cherishes his quiet time with wife Stevie and the light of their life, Jessica. Darrell, how old were you when you left Owensboro?
Let's see, I was 21.
21, and Michael, you were, when he left?
When I left Owensboro, I was 17 or 18. I might have just turned 17 or just turned 18.
But when Darrell left, you were what, 5?
Yeah.
Just a little pup.
So, you know, the Darrell Waltrip, the race car driver, he was someone, he didn't really live in the house.
No, it was, a lot of people don't really understand that because, like, when I was born, he was 16. So, therefore, turning 16 for a race car driver is like everything. You know, you're on the road then. You don't have to depend on anybody else. You can get to the races and you can race all you want. So from the time I was born, he was pretty much gone. And I grew up more probably, you know, in admiration of him or separate from him. I was a big fan of his. I loved to watch him race. He won the races. It made it a lot of fun for me, and that's how I learned about racing. Not hands-on, but you know, more secondary.
So he wasn't the older brother that stole your bed or things like that. He was just someone out there.
I left my bed there for him.
Yeah. That's right.
The first time I saw him race was in Nashville, as a matter of fact, over here at New Smyrna. You remember that on that little go-kart track over there? And I'd never seen him drive. My dad had told me he'd been racing go-karts, and I'd never seen him drive a go-kart. And he was kind of like I am. He was too big for it anyway, but I remember he started like last in this little race they had, and he took the lead on the first lap by going down in the infield and slamming into somebody and kept on going. I said, oh, God, I can't, I don't want to.
He's still doing that, isn't he?
No, he still does a pretty good job of it. And then I watched him run those little cars, you know, those international, what do you call those?
Baby Grands.
Baby Grands.
Darlington Dash is what they were when
And that one year won just about every race. And I think I hurt his feelings one time. More than one time, probably a lot of times, but I remember somebody asked me what I think about the way he drove, and I said, I don't know, I ain't never seen him race anybody. Because that particular year he didn't. You remember I told you that he had a fast car, and he'd get on the pole and he'd take off and lead the race and win, you know, and I never really seen him race anybody.
That was real.
I knew he could drive fast though.
That was, I mean, when I came to Winston Cup, I probably had less experience than anybody you could imagine, because he was right. We qualified for 15 races that year, and I sat on the pole 14 times. And the only race I didn't sit on the pole was at Rockingham, and I couldn't figure out the track, but by the time the race rolled around, I figured it out, and I led the first lap from the third starting position.
Yeah.
So I just was really fast. I spent a lot of time out front, and before that, I'd have just run like at the Kentucky Motor Speedway where Darrell started, running a quarter mile, and I had no experience. In 1985, when I ran the World 600, that was the first Winston Cup race I attempted to run. And I made the field, qualified 20th or 22nd, and man, was I in for a big surprise. It was amazing to me.
That's where you started, Owensboro, the Kentucky Motor Speedway?
Yeah, Whitesville, Kentucky Motor Speedway. It's not even a quarter mile. It's a small quarter mile. But when I started, it was paved. And when I started, when I was 16, I got old enough to drive a car. My dad and I we bought a car partially built, a 36 Chevrolet. Somebody had already welded a roll cage in it and started gutting it out. So we bought it for $100, I think, something like that, and then we put it together. And my first race was on dirt. And I'd never driven dirt. All I'd ever driven was my go-kart on asphalt road courses mainly, not even very many ovals, just mainly road courses. And the first night we go down to Ellis Speedway. This was down west of Owensboro, and it was a pretty big, it was like a...
It was a big quarter.
Yeah, it was more like a 3/8 mile dirt track, pretty high banked, fast race track. And first night we go down there, we tow our Chevy in there, and it's number 6. Got Wild Child written on the side of it. It's a fine looking piece. And I don't
was this Wild Child already on the car when you bought it?
No. That's the name. There was a song back in those days called Wild Thing.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to be a wild thing, so I wanted to be Wild Child, because I was just a kid, you know. And boat racing was big. Remember the Sterrett brothers and Bill Sterrett and Terry and Billy Jr. They drove Miss Budweiser. And so there was a Miss Owensboro, and there was a Miss Budweiser, and everything had a name on it, you know, so I thought you had to put a name on your race car. Certainly never thought about putting a sponsor on this thing. I get in the car, and if I remember right, I think I had a football helmet for a crash helmet, if I remember correctly. And I'd never been on a track like this before, and we got there early so I could get some practice. You know, they water the dirt tracks down,
exactly.
You know.
There's not very much practice.
No, and so at Whitesville, at Ellis, you pitted over on behind the 3rd and 4th turn, and you came out on the track off the 4th turn. There was a grandstand, a big concrete wall all down the front, but there wasn't any concrete walls anywhere else. If you went off the track, you went over the hill down in the valley. So I go out and I go, and I'm just, the track is muddy.
Yeah.
You know, you got to run it in. So I go around the first turn, I barely, man, this don't feel right. It wasn't like my go-kart. I just barely turned it and it would turn. I get to the 3rd and 4th turn, and I'm not going very fast, because you couldn't go very fast. I got to the 3rd and 4th turn, and I started in there, and front end started pushing, bam! hit the only place on the racetrack you could hit something, and I hit the wall and knocked the front axle out from under my race car.
Nice debut.
I didn't even make, well, I guess that was one lap.
Complete lap.
I made it back to where I started.
Let me tell you about my first race ever. This is the best story ever.
Was you there for his first race?
No, he wasn't.
I don't think
this
so.
Was in.
Was Leroy there?
Leroy was there.
Oh, Leroy.
So Leroy had to go through all this, yours and his.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a whole lot more.
Leroy is Michael and Darrell's father, by
Yeah.
the way.
When we say we're going to wake up Leroy, we're going to wake up Leroy.
It was really neat. I built me a little mini stock, 4-cylinder, to carry out to Kentucky Motor Speedway, same place he had started. And I was a senior in high school, 17 years old. May of that, when I graduated from high school, I started racing. And the first night we went out there, we went out and practiced, and the car was painted yellow, or painted green with Mountain Dew on it, and 11 looked just like his car. And we went out there and practiced, and you know, I was pretty good. I did pretty good at it. Didn't have any problems. Everything went pretty smooth. The first night come to race, a boy from Nashville here named Newt Moore. He was he was a young kid, but he was real experienced, won all the mini stock races in Nashville. He come up to Owensboro to get ready for the season in Nashville, and I go out and I set a new track record first time out. First time I ever qualified. Well, Newt's right behind me. He goes out and breaks it. He's got the track record now. So they do the trophy dash in our division, and it's a 4-lapper. I started 3rd, Newt 4th. They invert the field, 4 cars in it. I get the lead on the first lap, get by those first 2 guys and get the lead on the first lap, lead it for 3 laps. Newt passes me and wins. Does the same thing in the heat race. I got through the traffic first, I'm leading. Lap to go, he got by me and won. And they started the features, a 30-lapper, and we ran along, and I got the lead, and I'm leading forever, and he's right behind me. And I slip up high with like 2 or 3 laps to go, and he goes under me, and down to the next corner, he goes up high, and I go under him, and won the first feature I ever ran. And it was, I mean, I would give the world if I had a video of it, because this was a race. I was racing somebody, and I beat him, and I never will forget the minute when I stopped on the racetrack to get the checker flag. I mean, I was beside myself, and my dad come running out there, you know, to congratulate me, and we got our picture made, and we drove in the pit area, and I'm sure it was probably just 10 or 12 people, but when I come into the pits and drove up to my spot where I was going to park, it looked like 1,000 people were standing there waiting for me, you know, saying, to tell us we did a good job, and that was the first night I ever raced, and it was a great memory.
So when you left Owensboro and you came to Nashville, right? Mm-hmm. But you didn't have a guitar on your back, you came to be a race car driver?
Yeah. You know, Owensboro sits right on the Ohio River. As a matter of fact, they used to run a powerboat race there on the river at Owensboro. And now they run it up the river just a little ways at Evansville, Indiana. But Owensboro is right on the river, just across from Evansville, Indiana. And it's in the western part of Kentucky. I went to a lot of open wheel races. I used to go to Des Moines, Illinois, and the Indiana State Fair, and Terre Haute, and track over in Evansville there just out of town, Hopstock. I drove a sprint car for a few times. And I was sitting there kind of on the fence with the river between us, not knowing which way I wanted to go. But fortunately, I had an experience with a sprint car that made me realize that wasn't what I wanted to do.
What'd you do?
Well, at this same racetrack I started on, Ellis Speedway, one night they brought the sprinters over from Hopstad. We raced on Friday night there, and they raced on Sunday nights. And so they brought all the sprinters over to put on an exhibition, just some hot laps, and show the people in Owensboro what the cars look like and how they got around the racetrack. Well, the guy that was supposed to drive this one particular car, he didn't show up. And so they were looking for somebody to drive it, and everybody said, put Darrell in. He knows this. He likes this track. He can get around there in it. I'd never been in anything like it. It was exciting, you know, and that was kind of the progression at that time. I hopped in that thing, and sure enough, I mean, I was throwing mud over the grandstand. I had it, I was having a ball. I'd never driven anything like that. Old car I was driving was a 56 Ford with a 312 in it. All of a sudden, I'm in this Sprinter, you know, with these big tires, and man, I was having a good time. Well, I got done with the little exhibition deal. The man that owned it said, I want you to drive this car. He said, that guy's been driving it, can't drive it like you can. So I got in, I went to Hopstad. I was only 17. The first night I went over, I didn't get to run because we didn't know, Mom and Dad were with me, that we had to have a release because I wasn't old enough to drive. And we hustled around all night trying to find a place to get an notary to say I could drive. Well, we didn't make it that first night, so then I went back the next week, got everything squared away, went back the next week and got in a sprinter and qualified not fast enough to be in the first heat, but I was at the back of the second heat. And I'd never driven in a race at all in the thing. They dropped the green flag, and I mean, I thought somebody was shooting at me, mud flying. I had an open face helmet, goggles, but I looked good. I had on, I knew AJ always wore those red driving golf gloves. I had me a pair of those. And I had on a red windbreaker that blew in the wind. So I looked good. I was pretty racy looking. So they take off and they run the heat race, and we go down through there, and I moved up to 4th place and was moving up pretty good, and a guy spun in front of me and went over the top of him, tore the car up. Well, that was okay though. I mean, it's the first time I ever been in this darn thing. What do you expect? And it wasn't my fault, and guy wanted me to come back in the next week and drive it. And so I went back the next week, and by now I'm getting comfortable in it, and I'm running pretty darn good. I'm one of the fastest sprinters there. And I'm getting a little cocky too. And you know how, I don't know if you know how on those cars they run alcohol, and you had to turn the fuel off, kick it in the in and out box, kick it out of gear and clean it out, clean the injectors out. And so I'm out practicing, and they said, now be sure when you come in, you kick it out of gear, turn the fuel off, clean the engine out, because you don't want the fuel sitting in the injectors. No problem. And I come in, you coasting in there, and you kick her out of gear, and you turn the fuel off, and boom, blowed it up right there in front of the man. But all I'd ever driven was those old V8 dirt cars, Well, you could wrap the fire out of one of them and it wouldn't hurt it. And I'd never done anything like that before. And so I cut the fuel off, kicked her out of gear, and wrapped her up and blew her up right in front of the man.
You accelerated so fast
it just went out, it pegged, whoa, whoa, boom. Guy said he didn't need me no more. That was my last chance. But I realized after going through that experience that wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I started coming to Nashville and watching races. I watched a race here in Nashville, and I think it's '65. Hutch won it, I believe. And it was a race where Tiny Lund and Rex White, and I believe Pistone may have been in it, went into the 3rd turn, and they went up into the fence, and cars all caught on fire. And Tiny dove out of his car and rolled down the banking, and I think Hutch won that race. And I thought that was pretty exciting.
Once you came to Nashville, did you have a ride, or was you looking for?
How I ended up here in Franklin was, everything's got a story. The man that I started driving for down here, his name is P.B. Crowell, C-R-O-W-L-L, and he had a trucking company here, still does. He used to like to come to Owensboro. He'd race here. He was a track champion here back in the 60s. And he'd race here on Saturday night, and then he'd pull his rigs up to Owensboro. They would bring their boat with them, and they'd go out on the Ohio River all Sunday afternoon and ski and have a big time, and then come out to Whiteville and race on Sunday night. Well, I was the local bad guy, and I had a 58 Ford with a 427 tunnel port in it that I had no idea where it was going to go next. I just knew you had to hold it wide open to make it go fast. So I run over a lot of things and a lot of people, and one I didn't get killed, but PB would come up here, and he had these nice cars. Bobby Allison built most of them, and they were 64 and 65 Chevelles. Freddie Fryer drove for PB, Bobby had driven for him, Donnie had driven for him. A lot of different guys had driven for him on and off. And he'd bring these beautiful cars up there, and he'd kick our butt. I mean, it wasn't no contest. He had a race car, and we just had a tank, And, but I'd always managed to somehow or another get a wheel mark on him if I didn't do nothing but get it on there when he went by. And he and I got to be big buddies, and I'd go down to the river with him on Sunday afternoon and hang out with him, and then we'd go to the track and race on Sunday night. He had an accident here in 1968, I think it was, and broke his back. And it was in a testing session prior to the season starting. And he was friends with Cuckoo Marlin's brother, Jack Marlin. Jack drove for him, and some other people was driving for him. And all of a sudden, he just called me out of the clear blue and said, how would you like to drive my car? And I had driven for him a few times when he'd bring an extra car to Owensboro and won with his cars, and he knew me. I said, man, I'd love to. I'd been down here a few times and caused some god-awful crashes, but I'd never done any good, And so he called me, and I came down, and I drove the car, and the first night I drove it, I won in it. And that was...
The rest is history.
That was the beginning. And then I moved here in the winter of '69, right after we got married. And in the winter of '70, was it, honey? Yeah. We've been married about a year. And I wanted to be down here closer to the car, and I was going to drive the car full time in '70. And I think 71 was the year that they took Nashville, made it into that real high bank monster track. And they didn't get the thing opened up till about the middle of the season, July. And I won the Flameless 300. That was the first race they had. And then I won the track championship that year, and several other races that year. And that was the year I also got me, bought a Winston Cup car from Holman and Moody, my Mercury I had. And
That was your car now, right?
yeah, yeah. My father-in-law and some friends of his bought it for me, and helped me get it. And me and some guys from Owensboro went down and got the car and brought it over here to PB's shop, and I took it to Texas and sat on the pole with it first time I run it.
Wow. So when you left home, when did you leave Owensboro?
In the fall of '83.
So Darrell was a big Winston Cup star by that time.
I just won the Darlington Dash Series National Championship that year, and was going to defend that championship in '84 with Richard Mash, who built my four-cylinder Darlington Dash car, Bill Quisenberry, a fellow from Owensboro who's responsible for me being where I'm at now. He, in Owensboro...
And he was a friend of mine, too. He went to races with me and a lot of my friends before Michael ever started, but he was a big race fan.
I didn't have any money to race on, and Mom and Daddy wasn't in a position for me to race, and Bill was responsible for getting me into go-karting, and then responsible for allowing me to race out at Kentucky Motor Speedway, helped out, you know, paid the bills on that operation. All the way into the Winston Cup, really. He sponsored my dash car in association with Comfort Coach. Bill Borden and those guys up there in Louisville built vans. They were on the side of my car. I was basically a bum when I left Owensboro. I went to Louisville and moved in with Borden and lived there for a year or so until he got tired of me. And off to North Carolina I went, and when I got there I moved in with Kyle and Patty Petty. Lived in the basement of their house for 3 or 4 months while working at Petty Enterprises.
They knew you were there, didn't they?
From time to time.
You was there time to time, or they knew you were there time to time?
They knew I was there because the water heater blew up one night, and the water heater was in the basement. And Kyle goes down the stairs, you know, and the basement was just kind of mine. I didn't really pick up my mess too well or make my bed. Everything down there, I knew where it was, so I didn't worry about it. So the water heater's spouting off one night, and the floor's flooded, and all my clothes are laying in the floor. So Kyle just takes all my clothes and starts using them as a mop to get the water dried up. And he said, something stunk. I said, I don't know what, I couldn't figure out what it was, but it was the worst smelling thing I ever smelt in all my life. And this is 1985, mind you. And he said he finally located what the problem was. It's a pair of my tennis shoes. And when he found them, he just took them and flung them out the back window, and they lived on Baden Lake. And away they went floating down the lake, you know. And I come in that night, you know, and I notice things don't look exactly right, but I hop into bed and I get up the next morning to go to work, and I come upstairs, I didn't have any shoes. I said, Kyle, have you seen my shoes? He said, yeah, I've seen them. He said, in fact, I imagine anybody down there about the dam would see them right now, because I threw them out the back door and they're floating down the lake. And that's the only pair of shoes I had, and he said they stunk terrible. And he said, you need to do something about cleaning that basement up. And I got a pretty good idea right then. I might be at the end of my rope. You know, wore out your welcome.
Yeah.
I started thinking, what am I going to do next?
Anytime you stink up the neighborhood, it's time to leave. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is.
The bad part about it is I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. I moved in with these people and lived in their house.
How'd you go to work?
Drove Kyle's. Lived in their house, worked for them, and drove their cars. Ate their food, washed my clothes. It's just a great story of how wonderful Richard and Kyle Petty is. But I'll go on.
Wait a minute, did you pay rent?
No.
No.
This gets worse. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It does get worse.
Go ahead. So,
It got a lot worse before it got better.
The reason why the shoes stunk, I got them like in 1980, and that was 1985. So that was my story on the shoes. But I was going to work, you know, every day, commuting back and forth from Kyle's to Petty Enterprises, and it was about a 100-mile round trip, 110-mile round trip. And I was walking through the parking lot one day, and Linda come up to me and said, Richard's wife, Linda Petty, came up to me and said, you know, if you're tired of driving back and forth that far, you know, we just live 2 miles from the shop. If you would like, you can stay with us for a while. And
In their basement.
no, I moved right into Kyle's room.
Did you really?
Yeah, I didn't.
I mean, you went from a basement to Kyle's room.
Basement, that's right. And I broke the news to Kyle and Patty. I said, I'm gonna be leaving, y'all. I know this is gonna be tough on you. They started gathering my stuff up for me, and off I went. And so I moved in with Richard, and I moved right in on the. I was in Kyle's room. I had a bed so big that I couldn't even reach across. They had a lady that'd come clean the house, and she would wash my clothes and fold them up for me. Linda would cook every night. I'd drive Richard's van. That also went a little bad because I come home in his van one night and left it sitting there, and he got in it to go to the shop, which is 2 miles away, and halfway there he ran out of gas.
He was buying the gas. Or was you supposed to buy the gas, or?
It was a 50-50 deal, what we were.
But you didn't take care of your 50, right?
At that point, it was a 50 deal, and my 50 is what ran out, I think. But I tell you, just living there and being a part of that was the greatest thing ever, because I had always, Darrell was everything. Anything about racing that I knew, it was because of Darrell, or I believed in what Darrell, the way he did things, and that's all I ever knew. And I never knew Richard Petty, and I never knew Kyle, and it was so nice of those people just to let. I lived there for a year, and moved out in the fall of '85. Richard had told me, just drive anything. If you can get a Winston Cup ride, it don't matter if you hadn't done it before, you take advantage of what you can get. And through his advice, I got a ride with Dick Bayer in '85. Ran those 5 races I was telling you about. My first one was the World 600. And you talking about a mess. Here I was, fresh off, like Darrell said, never racing a soul. And just out there riding around in the lead all the time. I get in this Winston Cup car for the World 600. I live with Richard Petty, so it's like if I see him coming, I got to get out of his way for sure. Darrell's my brother. I need to stay clear of him. Bill Elliott's going for $1 million bonus if he can win the 600. Well, I don't want to crash him. I got to really be careful there. And Kyle's the one that was responsible for at least getting me to North Carolina. I said, I got to be careful around him. So I was a nervous wreck for 500 miles. I didn't make it to the 600. The transmission went out. But, he was responsible for driving me toward getting into Winston Cup racing at that point. And it was just really fun being a part of their family.
Darrell, you've been racing a Winston Cup car for 10 years you started in '72, your first race.
72, yeah.
So you've been running some Winston Cup races for 13 years, and all of a sudden you look up in the rearview mirror, or you look in front of you, and there's your brother.
He had to wait a long time before he ever looked in front of him, unless he was coming to lap me.
Well, yeah.
You can believe one thing, I was looking out for him.
But it was a strange feeling the first time you saw him on the racetrack, wasn't it?
Well, it's of all the family members, I think he and I we weren't that close. I mean, we're brothers and we love each other and we worry about each other and all like that. But man, I've been gone from home so long, and he was at home and I'm in racing, and I didn't know him all that well, and he just all of a sudden shows up and says he wants to drive a race car, and I thought, well, he just wants to do that because that's what I do, and he thinks that's what he's supposed to do. So I watched him run that baby grand car, and he did good with that. But then when he started talking about driving a Winston Cup car, I thought, no, I don't know about this. He just didn't have the experience, or at least didn't have very much experience. And so when he first started out, he made me a nervous wreck. I didn't like to watch him.
I made me a nervous wreck.
I remember when he run Darlington, first time, and I thought, oh my God, he's gonna kill himself.
And that was another proud moment of mine. I made that race and run 3/4 of it and never hit a thing.
What finally put you out?
Broke the oil pump locked up, and I clutched it and did not blow the motor up.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
That is, and did hit a thing.
No. But he really made me nervous watching. I didn't even like to watch him race, and he had a tough time. I mean, he struggled with his driving, and he didn't have the greatest car in the world. It wasn't like he was in a car that should win the race. I mean, he had a car that was decent, but it wasn't the greatest car in the world, and he struggled with his driving, trying to figure out where he wanted to be and what he wanted to do and everything out on the racetrack. And I couldn't be a lot of help to him because it was hard for me to tell him anything because he didn't know anything. It was hard for me to tell him what he was doing wrong because he didn't know what he was doing wrong, and he just didn't relate to it. And he had a lot better luck of other people telling him, you know, how to do things and what to do and what not to do, and I helped him when I could, but actually, him being in Winston Cup racing has strengthened our relationship and probably made us closer now than we ever were when we were growing up.
My deal with racing and my relationship with him forever was if I needed to know anything, I knew he was there, you know, and I knew how to ask him, and you know, he was such a respected part of the racing community that him winning 3 championships before I started racing certainly made my chances of survival greater. So, you know, I owe a lot to him, but like he's saying, it never was really hands-on at all. It was just a situation where I was off doing my thing and he was off doing his. Fortunately, I was smart enough to watch him and learn from him so that I could survive. And when I came to Winston Cup racing, I didn't have a good chance of staying. I was very inexperienced, like I said. Our team was highly underfinanced. We barely could get from race to race. But the team was a bunch of people like me. They didn't really know what they were doing. I didn't really know what I was doing. So nobody really blamed each other because we couldn't figure out, you know, who was at fault. We just hung in there and stuck together. And fortunately, about middle of '87, you know, Dick Bear was so great to me, and I love him like a father. He's the best man I've ever been involved with, and I was so fortunate. I think that's where my success has come from, just being lucky enough to get with great people. Bill Quisenberry helped me all the way into Winston Cup racing. Then I got with Dick Bear. He was as honest as the day is long, put me in a car for a year and a half or two, and really went out on a limb financially to do that. And then Chuck Ryder coming along to become a part of the team and put some money into the deal. And since the middle of '87, I felt secure. I felt like we had a chance of making it. And that's a good feeling to have that kind of security.
When he, as he came along and I watched him, and he finally got up to a point there where I said, he just might make it. He's getting up.
I never did want to do it because he did it. You know, when I was a kid, everybody would say, what do you want to do? And I'd be afraid to say I want to drive a race car because they would think, hey, his brother does it, so he wants to do it. And I guarantee you, if you could have seen some of the stuff I've been through over the years, Ben, you'd know that I wouldn't have done it just because he done it. That'd been a good reason to quit.
But what year did you drive my car and win Dover?
See, this is another story that I'm sure that
You don't want to talk about it?
No, I'd like to talk about it.
We're talking about the Bush race in Dover, Delaware.
Yeah.
Well, how that came about, Darrell wrecked his Bush car at Bristol in August.
I'd like to kill myself.
Hurt himself pretty bad, so we go down to Darlington.
I'm
and
a hurt puppy.
I never have driven a Bush car.
And he's always on my case. Well, you let Terry Labonte drive your car, you let Bill Elliott drive your car. How come you won't ever ask me to drive your car?
I never
Kind of
had,
hurting my feelings, you know.
I never had been in
It's
a...
going to hurt your pocketbook.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. Feelings of men, bud.
I never had been in a Bush car, and I knew if I got in one of those cars, I knew I could drive as good as those guys out there. I mean, I knew it in my heart because I'd driven a Winston Cup car and at times had outrun everybody on the track. That was in '88, and so I just felt like if I got in a good Bush car, I could be competitive. So he goes to Darlington and qualifies the car, and
Ribs were hurt. I didn't think I could run both days, Saturday and Sunday. And he'd been on me to drive, so I figured, well, this might as good a place as any.
yeah,
you know,
Darlington's as good a place as any for a guy that don't know what he's doing, huh, Ben?
Pretty hard on me. I guess it probably, maybe he would like it. I don't know. But anyway, we stuck him in the car there, and he did a whale of a job. I mean, he drove the wheels off the thing. What did you finish, third?
Finished third. We were running second.
But he would have won it if a caution hadn't come out. We had tires on our car, and we were still handling pretty good, and Harry again, I think, won the race.
Yeah.
And he was out of tires, and they were all sliding all over the place, and what, end under caution or something, didn't
under
it?
caution.
And so he run third. Bodine was second, and he was third.
Davey was right behind me.
And man, that's pretty exciting. Old boy did pretty good. And so then we went on up to Dover right after that, and he did a whale of a job up there.
Qualified fifth and won that race.
But you qualified the car.
Yeah, no, he did.
I did the whole deal at Dover.
Yeah.
I believe if I'd have done the whole deal at Darlington, I'd have won. I told Darrell I run it Saturday or Friday morning, and we were trying to hire Ken Wilson at that point, and I had a high-powered golf match set up with him for Friday afternoon. I said, now, Darrell, take my car out here in this last practice and get it tuned in, but don't mess with it too much because it's about the way I want it. And he changed it a little bit more than I'd like to have seen.
It was perfect.
So how much did you pay him at
Well,
one race at Dover?
Well, you know, just think about it. This is my car.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not Junior's car, it's not Rick's car, it's my cars I'm putting him in, you know, and it was my money.
Wait, let me ask you a question. Is that the way you approach Junior and Rick? That's your car, Junior. I don't want you to pay me very much.
It's different.
He's
Explain the
family, right?
difference.
You already explained that. Where I was when you came along and where you were when you came along, that's the difference. So I had he did a good job at Darlington, and in excitement I said, well, all right, I'll let you drive the car at Dover. I mean, that's really how that happened. And so we took him to Dover.
So how much did you pay him at Dover? He won the race.
You know, the races don't pay a lot. And none of them, Darlington, I don't know.
I stood in at Darlington, ran third. I remember the check came, or the little envelope came in the mail. I said, all right, we're got some money here, and I opened it up, and I think it was like maybe $350.
But that, I
And
mean,
I
he got a
was-
ton of exposure. It's the best he'd ever done. People told me after the race, after the Darlington race, you know, walking through the garage area, he said, you might have proved something with that boy there. That's the first time I ever seen him drive that good.
So it's worth something,
Well,
right?
I-
That's right.
I called him before we were going to Dover, and I said, I got my check today, and I'm just concerned if I don't win Dover, am I going to owe you money? Because I'm afraid if I did any worse than third, it was going to be bad for me.
I'll let you keep the trophy.
Yeah,
What'd you ever do with
It's
it?
in my office. Started my collection there. And Benny, this is the part where we could say, and the rest is history, but it isn't yet. So
That ain't the rest of the story, I'm afraid.
Bristol sportsman race on Saturday. Probably the worst crash that any of us, three of us, have ever seen in a stock car race.
Yeah.
Michael hounds the wall coming off the second corner. Is there any way to describe the emotions that you go through sitting there watching that?
Me and Jeff and Sandy Jones were standing, you know, the Winston Cup cars were pitted on the back straightaway, and they used the front straightaway for the race. We were about halfway down the back straightaway there, and we were standing up in the back of the truck watching the race. And he had a couple of close calls, and something had happened and put him at the rear of the field, had to pit, or he spun out, or I don't remember what happened.
we didn't qualify, and I started dead last, and not through pit stops, but just through racing. I was running second, and that was pretty tough that day because that track was a mess.
Yeah, it was slick.
And then me and Kyle pit, and hard head as we are, we're both trying to race up through there, and I bump him a little, and he hits me back, and I hit him back, and we both go spinning down the front straightaway.
Spun out.
So that put us in the back again, and took off to come back up through there, and my car was just ungodly fast. I was determined I was going to win.
See, I
that
already
race.
knew. I knew now. I said, now he's at the back of the field. This ought to be exciting, because he had been pretty exciting anyway, most of that race. And we're standing there watching him. Of course, I'm peeking around the corner of the truck, watching for him to come off turn 4, and or turn 2, yeah. And all of a sudden he comes off there and he's up high, and the boy in that 59 car, I don't know if he hit you or drove him up into the slick part of the racetrack, you know. But man, oh man, I mean, it's just, he hit the end of hit that gate and in that wall. The car exploded into a million pieces, fell down there on the track, and man, I don't know, Jeff probably could tell you more how I was than I could tell you how I was. I mean, I just about went into shock.
I did too.
You know, I mean, I thought I stood there and watched him get killed, you know. And I started off the back of the truck and I said, no, I can't go up there, I can't. Then I jumped off, and then Jeff got a hold of me, and we went down there a little ways. I said, y'all go, I don't want to go. And they started going. I said, no, wait, I'll go. He might need me. So, I mean, I'm going, then I'm not going, then I'm going, then I'm not going. And, you know, and nobody's really got there yet. And by the time I get there, about the same time that the rescue crew does and everything, and they raise the roof. The roof's laying on top of him, and he's sitting on the ground. And they raise the roof up, and there the big dummy sits. He's sitting in there, and he's kind of just acting like ain't nothing wrong, you know, like if I can get this thing cranked, I'll be all right. And I looked, I said, "Oh, Michael, are you okay?" He looked over me and said, "What's wrong with you?"
He said it once, and I looked up at him and I said, "I'm all right." And "Are you sure you're okay?" I said, "Yeah," I said I was all right. And then he walked off, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not all right. Maybe there's more to this story than I know. But I got to looking down, and
He's sitting on the ground.
it never occurred to me. I was in my seat, but my feet were actually laying on the ground. But it never occurred to me that I had been in an accident of that proportion.
Looked like a bad cartoon. The steering wheel's over here upside his head. He's sitting on the ground with his feet sticking straight out. Nothing. I mean, it's just an incredible mess.
They got pictures of it, and there's a brake puck bouncing down the track, and Sterling, every time I got to sign a picture, he said, "Hold on, let me see it." "Yep, there it is." He said, "Anytime you hit it hard enough to knock a brake puck out, you hit hard."
But I can tell you this, after watching what happened to me at Daytona in July, I can imagine I know how everybody else felt, because I know how I felt when I saw him. And
I was right behind him, and
Daytona.
yeah, and I saw two cars veer off the track, but I couldn't tell who they were. And you ever see that cartoon Snoopy with that pig pen? He always walks around dirt falling everywhere. It just looks like these two cars go over in the dirt, and it makes a big ball, and you can't see what's inside of it. And I'm driving down through there looking over, and I see a hood fly straight up in the air, and it like flew up and presented itself to me. It said Western Auto, and I said, you know, I think it might be Darrell, and we went on around, and I come back over there and was fortunate that I was able to stop, and Joe Ruttman came over there, and he assured me, he said, "I've talked to Darrell, I've seen him, he's moving, he's fine, don't worry about it." And I think when we went back to racing, it drove me. I was more determined. I said, I'm gonna just go do try to win this race, because I knew he was okay, and I knew, you know, that if I was laid up, wrecked, or hurt somewhere, I'd want him to go win the race for me, and I just thought maybe that'd be what I needed to do.
Can you explain how you see something like, Mike, you saw Darrell in one of the, no doubt, the worst crash he's ever been in. And in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, they're going to throw the green flag, and you've got to go do the same thing.
Well, I mean, I'm just really tuned into what I do. I love driving a race car, and I'm only 28 years old, but I just can't imagine not being able to do it. It's just the thing that makes me tick. I remember we were in Atlanta in March of this year, and we're running around there, and I never really thought about people saying, "Man, you guys drive race cars are crazy." And I never really thought about that, but I'm running, and I found the high groove. I'm running about a foot away from the wall.
Time out. I found the high groove.
Well, then I took it from him.
All right. I mean, I'm motoring on off, you know. I'm not leading the race, but I'm coming to the front.
Catching up.
Past him, he's down in the bottom down there digging around, sliding all over the place. I said, "Look at that." And I went on by. Go ahead.
Then what happened?
Then I said, "Mark," it was my spotter, I said, "Next time you see somebody do something like that, let me know a little ahead of time, because I'm in his groove now, and he's holding me up in it." So I made my way around him, I'm running, and we're running 180, 190 mile an hour at Atlanta down the straightaway, and the sand really pits the windshield with the sun and everything, running a couple of feet away from the wall. And I'm driving off of a seam in the pavement, running that fast. That's what I got to judge by. That's all the good I can see, you know, as fast as I can go. And it occurred to me one of those laps doing that sideways and blowing dirt every which way, you know, maybe I am a little bit crazy. I ain't too sure.
Michael, when Darrell had the crash in Daytona in practice and broke the leg, did you think about, am I doing the right thing?
I never thought about that. When I wrecked at Bristol on Saturday and watched it on TV that night, I couldn't wait to get to the track Sunday morning to get back in my car to make sure I was going to be comfortable to race.
It's just like at Daytona. If I could have got out of that car and got into another car, I probably would have. If I could have gotten right back out of that car and got right into another one and finished that race, I probably would have.
Are we talking about the one you flip?
Yeah. I mean, you know what kind of shape I was in, but I mean, that's the mindset you have. It's like you think if Jack Nicklaus hits a ball out of bounds, he doesn't wish he could, out of bounds, you wish he couldn't get it back and hit another one. Well, that's kind of how you feel. I mean, you know, you want to get out there and...
I've never, I mean, the way I look at this deal, and I always have, is I get myself physically ready to get in that car. And when I get in it, I strap on all those belts and I put on my helmet. And when I'm done with all that, I feel as safe as I'm laying in my bed. I mean, I feel very comfortable. And if I ever got in the car and was apprehensive or felt like I could get hurt, I don't think I could get in it, because you got to have that confidence and that comfort level, because I think if you think you're going to get hurt, you will get hurt.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so I'm real comfortable with what we do. And
I'm not real excited about the way some guys do what we do, but I'm comfortable with my car. I know that my men build an outstanding race car, safe. That's one thing that I stress, and Jeff is real conscious of. And
that's another thing we can thank NASCAR.
NASCAR, you know,
over
through the years,
they could have gotten away from that.
People that have gotten killed, you know, it's a sorry state of affairs, you might say, but by virtue of things happening to race cars, we've made them better, almost to the point to where they're indestructible.
Well, that's proven. You've tried to prove that.
Oh yeah,
times.
yeah, that
He's
thing.
trying to outdo me, but he ain't gonna make it.
No, he's not going out. Hopefully, he will never outdo what you do.
No.
It's funny, last year.
Mine was longer though. Yours was like.
It was real short.
Yours was kind of short, but mine was. My deal was a lot longer. I mean, I got something to sell. I mean, you could talk over. You can't talk over your deal because it happens
It'd
too
be
quick.
like, okay, what? Did you see it?
Yeah, but see, my deal. I mean, my deal is marketable. I mean, you could see me coming off the track, and you can see. I mean, you know, I could talk over that for a long time.
We discussed that last night. I've always been a David Letterman fan, and if I was ever jealous of him, it was last night, because his business manager Joe Carver said, we got that deal up in New York, like they were trying to keep it a secret from me, like honestly, like I really cared. So I was like, what deal? Carver said, we're going to be on Letterman, show the wreck. I said, well, my wreck was a lot better than y'all's, and they never did get me to come up there. And Darrell said, well, you're just too short.
You're just too short.
So they'll show my wreck, and I can narrate
You'd walk
over.
out, they'd show your wreck, and that'd be the end of the show. I mean, you got to have something to talk about.
So if you're watching this, Dave, I got a better wreck. Give me a call.
When you come back to Nashville, now you've got Jessica. How old is Jessica now?
She'll be 4 September the 17th.
And that has obviously changed your life.
Oh yeah, it's just another dimension, you know. Stevie and I, we've been buddies and friends, and we've traveled together, and we've done everything you can do. We've been everywhere you can go, and we've had the best of times. But when Jessica came along, it was just another dimension. It stepped everything up another level. Now we were doing it for, not just for Stevie and I, but now we were doing it for this little kid, you know. And going to Disney World, I've been to Stevie, you know, she's a kid at heart. I've been to Disney World a million times, but I ain't never been to Disney World like I've been to Disney World when I went with Jessica. To see those expressions, that excitement, and it's that way with everything. She makes my racing better for both of us, not just, it's not a one-way street. It's not just helping Dad. I mean, it's made our relationship stronger, and kids are wonderful. There's nothing like kids. We'd have some more if the Lord had let us.
It must be a
10 more?
10 more.
She's sitting over there saying 10 more. We wouldn't have 10 more, but maybe a couple more.
Must be
I'm just 44. I mean, I could still have kids.
There must be a dozen dogs running around here.
Man, we got dogs.
This
I don't
was
know.
from a lack of kids for 20 years, I think.
Yeah, we've had a lot of dogs through our in our married life, but you got old Jake over there, and you got Jenny, and you got Molly, and you got Ben, and you got Prissy, and you got Tinker, and we only own 3 of them. Ben goes out. He's a old male yellow lab, and he goes around the neighborhood and says, "Hey, come on over to the house. We got kibbles and bits." And about 10 o'clock, everybody shows up on the back porch at 10, and they eat, and then they go out and lay by the pool and do a little sunbathing.
Was this your Stevie? Who is the dog lover? You or Stevie?
Well, we both love dogs, but she's responsible for collecting them all. She goes out on it. Hardly a day goes by that she doesn't save a dog's life.
You're kidding.
She goes and picks one and take them to the vet and get them all shots and clean and finds them homes. And her and her sister are weird like that.
You got any?
I told her, I said, what do you think that dog's thinking? What if his wife sent him out to get a loaf of bread, and he's walking down the street going to the store, and you pick him up and get him all messed up, and he'll never get back home, and his wife will be having a fit.
I never seen a dog walking down the street with a loaf of bread in his mouth, though, so I don't think that.
Oh yeah, it happens around Franklin. It happens around here a lot.
You live in an apartment, Michael?
I have a condominium on Lake Norman.
You don't have a yard and dogs?
Nobody has apartments anymore. They have condominiums.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was apartments, but you don't have any dogs or cats?
No, I had a dog. I had a Cocker Spaniel Beaver, and he was a real neat dog, but somebody took him.
Oh, yeah?
So, Beaver, if you're out there, and things are a lot better now than when you were there.
He was walking down the street with a loaf of bread.
He may have been.
I had Beaver in '86, and I did live in an apartment, and I was kind of shoddy as a landlord for this dog, and I always said, I know he didn't get run over or anything because we searched for days for him everywhere, never found him anywhere. And I always said, well, somebody must have just stole him. I said, that's all I can. He was a great dog. No, someone just wanted him and took him. And a couple of the guys on the team said, no, we saw him. He was walking down the street. He had a stick over his shoulder with a bag on it, and his thumb stuck out, looking for a way out of there. I love animals too, and we had a dog just about all the time when we were growing up, but we didn't have a lot of dogs because we had enough mouths to feed.
Wait a minute. With 16 years difference, it wouldn't have been we. You had a dog and he had a dog.
I remember when
he had dogs.
I think she brought Duchess to us.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Stevie gave a Duchess to me for a Christmas present.
And he gave it to Mom and Dad.
I gave it to my mom and dad because I couldn't take care of it. Then Duchess, she was a dachshund, full-blooded dachshund, and she run up on a traveling man, and they had a litter of puppies. And we claimed out of that litter the only one that was brown, a little brown dog, and he was bigger than the rest of them. We called him Charlie Brown, and we had Charlie Brown for a long, long time. He traveled in a truck with Jake, and he went to all the races with us, slept in bed with us.
Not Jake the Yellow Lab either.
No,
Jake Elder.
Jake Elder. So we've always had some association with dogs, but family is important, and I tell you the honest truth, I kind of would like to be in Charlotte, closer to my race team, but I have so much here in Franklin, my home and my dealership and all my friends, and Stevie's family lives here, and my mom and dad are only 150 miles away, and it's kind of hard to move from here and go somewhere else at my age.
And I mean, you've got a fabulous place, and there's 3 of you, and Jessica still isn't ready for the horses and all these other things. So is this all these people come around riding horses? That's just your family, correct?
Well, we got Jennifer, Stevie's sister's daughter. She's responsible for me having any connection with horses. She liked horses, and when I moved here, there was a barn, and she needed a barn, and she needed an arena, and we didn't have Jessica then, so Jennifer, we basically raised her. Her mama sent her down here to stay with us a lot, and we raised her, and that's why she's such a good kid. And so we pretty well took care of her for a long time. And a lot of this stuff, like the horses and all, we got a long time of her. So, and now we got Jessica, and fortunately she'll be able to step right in.
So you own horses, or are these Jennifer's horses?
Some of them are mine, and one of them's Jennifer's. And
you haven't bought Darrell Waltrip, have you? That dog, that horse that runs up? That horse that runs up in the...
No, that belongs...
You bet on him he was a dog.
Yeah, he's won some races, though. He's a trotter. No, I have Lumina Bay. He's a walking horse, and he's away at school right now.
Boarding school?
He's a walking horse. I got to send him and teach him how to walk. And I've had some good times with horses, and I love horses, but I don't have time to fool with them.
You spend much time here in Tennessee, or most time around North Carolina?
I very seldom come here just to visit on occasion, but I go home to Owensboro from time to time to visit Mom and Dad, and all the rest of my time is spent in Charlotte, North Carolina. I live at Lake Norman. I have a boat and enjoy enjoy that.
It's a tough life.
And also, I like golf a lot. My dad, it's been real neat. In his later years with Pepsi, over the last 10 years, he's taken up golf, and it's just a real joy to have an opportunity. When I go home, we golf or go get him and take him to the race. We try to get out and golf. That's something that I enjoy a lot. In fact, I always think that maybe if I would just improve a little bit when I get done racing, I'm going to go on the seniors tour.
You got to improve a whole lot. Those guys know how to play, Michael, you know.
Yeah, I know, Ben.
But you know, the thing about our family is most families, as they get older, they grow apart. Our family has really grown closer together.
And it's through racing that they
And it's because of what we do. So it's really, that's a neat part about what we do.
What are you going to, when you retire from driving, you don't intend to be around for another 10 years, do you?
No, I don't. My deal with Western Auto was 4 years, and this is the first year, so you know it leaves me 3 years to kind of wind down, I guess you'd say, and I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to drive through this first commitment to them, and then be an owner after that. I don't ever want to leave racing. I want to stay involved, and I could be very happy, in all honesty. I love driving my race car. I love a good driving car. I love a good race. It's exciting. It gets my adrenaline flowing, and I love that. The accidents I've had have certainly made me think a little harder about what I'm doing, but I'd like to drive out my commitment to Western Auto and then put somebody else in my car, and I know I'll be very happy doing that. I feel comfortable. If I had to do that now, I'd be comfortable with that.
Michael, you're making decisions about your career is a long, long way off, but have you any idea what you might do after you quit driving?
I don't know. Darrell has a wealth of racing knowledge. He's owned his own cars. In fact, owns his Busch Grand National team and his Winston Cup team now, obviously. But he's done that for a long time. So he has experience in that and knows that real well. I, on the other hand, haven't and don't. And I don't think that's an area that I would ever get into. I might someday like to own a Busch car and run a few races if that was an option. That kind of interests me. Maybe I do in the future want to get into that. But right now I like to concentrate on driving the cars, and would like to think that I'll be doing that for some time to come.
That's the difference in his generation and mine and yours. He never thought about owning a car, and that's the only way we could get going. I mean, we had to own a car. We had to put a car together and get it out there.
If it hadn't been for GMAC, I wouldn't own one to drive on the road. So I darn sure didn't want to. I didn't have money to buy a race car. Buy one to go drive on the racetrack.
It was it never was even entered his mind, and that's the only thing that's the only thing I knew I had to do. I had to get a car, and go race. So
my relationship with Chuck and Pennzoil is a great relationship. We're real comfortable with our team, and I'm just real comfortable with my situation. I'm enjoying it right now, and so there's not any pressing decisions I'm going to have to make over the next, say, 20 years or so.
Plus, it just, you know, of all the drivers that are out there that I look at week in and week out in every series that we watch, I mean, he has the best chance of being the next big superstar in our sport, I think, and that's comforting for him and me both. His contract just happens to run parallel to mine.
How is it possible for two guys to be so funny and yet so serious? I hope you enjoyed it. I know I had lots of fun with these two guys.